All right, we're live. Already got some people in the chat. Somebody said very good guest. I agree. I've been wanting to have Carey on my channel for a couple months. As I was telling her before we even went live, it was actually Reed Coverdale, who has been on my channel a couple times. I've been on his channel a couple times, who was hounding me and pounding down my door. And he was like, get Carey on your channel. And so, of course, I do my research. I watch like 10 of your videos pretty recently. So I do my research, I watch your videos, and I was like, damn, okay, she's pretty based, and it seems like she has been very consistent. I don't know how you feel about this, but there's a lot of people on the internet who, there used to be like they have like some crazy like ideological flip, and they like blow up really big, and then you look at their old videos, and they're just like a complete like status like a year ago. And but you're not. You've been pretty consistent. You've been on the internet. You've been posting YouTube for like 10 or so years. And my favorite YouTube video of yours, I've shared it on Twitter before, but it was about your most dangerous religion video and about statism. I wanted to get your opinion on why it's the most dangerous religion and how it even kind of quantifies as a religion, because that's not like what people think about when they think about religious beliefs,
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's why it's probably the most insidious religion, is its most fervent adherents don't view it as a religion. They view it as like this mechanism, this institution of empowerment in a lot of cases. Not every government around the world, but it's so exquisitely dangerous because the mechanism, the source of authority for government is violence, which is not really the case for other religions. Of course, throughout history, that was fused together. The Catholic Church ruled over Europe and many parts of the world for a very long time through violence. So it was really operating as a government, because when you break it down to how government asserts authority, it's always violence. And I like to use the example of a parking ticket. So if you get a parking ticket, first of all, you're paying the people, you're paying, it's not voluntarily, but your taxes are used to fund the salary of the parking meter enforcer, or whatever, the law enforcement, whatever they are, the enforcer.
Right.
They pay for the meters, they pay for the roads, they pay for the department that issues the tickets. And then if you don't pay the ticket, if you say, no, I don't think so, that's not for me, I don't, they threaten to steal your property, that's that. Then if someone shows up to take your property and you resist, what are they going to do? They're not going to ask you nicely, they're going to use violence. All because you protected your property, all because they made a demand of you that you simply, it was a victimless crime, you parked on a road, So I think that I don't want to say that the way people are educated, it's intentional to hide the violence, because I think a lot of the educators are also blind to the violence because they're so committed to this ideology as well. But you have rituals, you have voting, you do all these little celebrations to commemorate the state. And I think this is especially true in America because the Constitution is so fused with the idea of freedom that a lot of people miss the fact that they're now tying freedom to government. And then they end up kind of worshiping at the altar. And of course, there are all different flavors of religion, of this ideology. But it really comes down to, one, people not being aware of it because it's propagandized so well. And it's viewed actually as an agent of change and progress. And whatever it is people like to project onto government that it never actually achieves, that it facilitates the delusion because it's never pointed out that people are so dogmatic about it. And then, of course, it's the violence that, I can just reference all of human history to make that point.
Absolutely. And that's an interesting point you brought up, how people are kind of brainwashed into thinking, oh, this is progression. All we have to do is convince the people in charge that we deserve rights and they will just give it to us. And that's how it works. And, the government, of course, is going to listen to us. And I've always had an issue with that. I don't know if I've ever put it into those words because you described it like way better than I can ever do. But I've always thought about
You're getting there.
It's so strange how so-called progressives and liberals and leftists are all like, we're going to protest the government so the government will give us this. We're going to protest the government for like, I don't know, a $15 minimum wage and free healthcare, and we're going to have equality because the government cares about your equality. But this is the same government that did like literally like insane shit, crazy racist shit, crazy sexist shit, like genocidal shit, like throughout like human history, not even just the United States government. So that has always confused me. I guess that is kind of a hallmark sign of our religion, because it's like, how are you believing in something that you see is just not there for you? That's just not there for you. That's going to kill you over a parking ticket. That's going to kill you over selling like a loose cigarette or something. Exactly. And people think that you can reform that system. And this is why Reed always jokes that I'm like a closet anarchist or something. And I know he like wants you to convert me to being an anarchist or just wants anyone to try. But But this is why, because I see that and it just doesn't make sense to me. It just doesn't make sense how people can try to reform this fundamental system that is just built off of non-compliance and just built off of like, just like, if you I guess I wouldn't say built off non-compliance. It's like if it's built off of the concept, if you are non-compliant, you're just gonna get killed. Like it's built off of like non-consent, I guess. And that really,
it's
and I don't know how to, yeah, I don't know how to explain that to people, like, because you're very prominent on YouTube and you have all these like really good educational videos where you're good at breaking it down in a way where simple-minded folks like myself can understand it. So how do you, I would say, like, how do you reach out to people who are like complete status, like not even like me who's like just a little bit status, but like just complete like neoliberal or neoconservative? Like, how do you reach out to those people?
Yeah, well, to be honest, I don't. My strategy is to go for the low-hanging fruit. People who are already aware that the system is not working. They don't have the word anarchy in their mind. They may not have even considered a world without government, but they fundamentally understand that the current paradigm is not working. And to be honest, I don't know who I reach. I don't read the comments anymore. I'm too sensitive. It hurts my feelings. But
that's so real.
I can't do it. there have been not so much anymore, but when I used to read the comments, there would be one mean comment and I'd be so sad for like over a day. I'd just be like, oh God, like questioning my value as a human being.
Literally me too.
Yeah, it's so easy to let that get to you until you realize that the people screeching the loudest are usually the ones you've triggered the hardest. So it's really not a bad thing. It's actually a sign that you're chipping away at their programming. So as much as it can like feel personal and hurtful, it's actually a really good sign to be upsetting people that much, because you're getting to the core of their dogmatism, of their ideology. And especially to speak to what you were saying about liberals and leftists, it's interesting because we have all this human history. So many of the issues that they're concerned about are actually consequences of government behavior, government policy. And there's this blind spot because according to their religion, it's a religion to me, they believe, and I think this is a piece that's really important for any ideology of statism, any flavor. There's this belief that government has superhuman abilities and rights and authority that we as mortal humans don't have. And I'm completely stealing this from Larkin Rose. He's heavily influenced all of my perspective. So if anyone's interested in this take, it's all Larkin Rose. So thank you, Larkin. But it's this belief that like, well, okay, as mortal humans, I'm not allowed to kill and steal. I can't initiate violence. I can't take other people's property. But by these magic rituals of voting and representation and the Constitution, these other human beings who would otherwise also be immortal and not have these rights are suddenly elevated to this higher status. And we're supposed to comply because they know best and they have all the answers, despite, again, track records of proving the opposite. Like they're actually the worst people to entrust this central planning violent system. But I think this belief that it's funny, a lot of atheists are super into big government. They kind of just have replaced a spiritual God with a government.
I've definitely noticed that. I don't like to generalize, but that's something that I've noticed. I think it's just in human nature to want something to worship above you. So it's like if you don't believe in a higher power, you believe that at least somebody somewhere has some type of control over you and you can just trust them. Because that's, what religious people believe. They think they can just trust in this higher power, which is fine, which is cool if that's what you're into. But I think a lot of people substitute that whole of wanting to trust something and just look at the government and give them this like power. And so I do see what you mean, because I don't know if I've thought about that in terms of like elected officials per se, but I agree with what you're saying. But I've definitely felt that in terms of law enforcement over this past year. I'm like, what gives a cop a right to do this that I don't? Is it a badge? Like I would never be able, if a cop is like falsely stopping me and falsely trying to arrest me or falsely trying to beat me up for something I didn't do, if I do something in retaliation, that's wrong and I go to jail, because you can't hit cops, you can't shoot cops, you're a cop killer, you're a cop hater, whatever. You can't defend yourself against the government because they have this, I don't know, I guess like you said, it's like this magical power that nobody really wants to challenge because they just want to feel like they can trust somebody.
Right. And it's human nature, of course, to want to feel safe, to want to feel secure. But I think the great crime of government, especially in regard to its propaganda, is instilling in people this belief. I mean, it's almost a limited belief or anti-belief where they cannot imagine a world without government. It's like Plato's cave. If all we ever see when we go to public school, when our parents receive the same educations, if all we ever see and hear is Well, democracy or a Republican form of government is the peak achievement of human society. We made it, we're here, and now we just have to protect it. That's the message I got in public school of like, well, here's how the system works, and these people represent you, and if you don't like them, you can vote them out and see how legitimate it is and see how you are the government and it represents you. Despite this very clear distinction between, okay, here's a class of people who believe that they have the right to use violence, they have the right to steal, they have the right to claim authority over others. There's that group of people. And then there's the rest of us who are expected to obey and are kind of duped into believing that these people, who often tend to be criminals, represent us and are serving us. Because there's this common sentiment people say, the government works for us. There are employees. And it's like, I don't know. In what work situation does your employer or your employee take your money without your consent? You know, like it's not really.
I think that's like wishful thinking. I think that's people trying to kind of reconcile the situation in their own heads, because deep down they know that shit's wrong. And so they're like, well, they work for us. They have to do what we say. Like, we're paying taxes. We're tax-paying Americans. They feel like it's their patriotic duty to be a tax-paying American. But it's like, do we really get shit for our buck? Like, do we ever?
Right.
Is anyone satisfied with it? I'd actually be very curious to interview somebody who is satisfied with how taxpayer dollars are being spent. And I don't know if you saw I don't know if you saw this clip or if you're like a Spike Cohen fan or anything, but I did see this clip. He was on some podcast like 2 weeks ago, and he was saying that if government was a private business, it would have like literally the worst business model ever. Like nobody is going, this shit would not work if it wasn't like coerced by violence. Like nobody is going to pay for this shit. Nobody's going to pay thousands of dollars for you to not fix potholes. Nobody's going to pay thousands of dollars for you to send your kids to like some shit box, like prison school. Like no one's going to pay for that shit. And so I think when people are just saying like, oh, they work for us, we're in charge, I think it's just like, they're literally like, just don't want to come to terms with it. That's all it is. They're just kind of in denial about it.
Right. And it's, I mean, when we're raised this way, and government, especially in our lifetimes, has taken such a bigger role in society, in people's minds, even, especially post 9/11, when people were so terrified. I can understand why people feel so attached to it. It's just kind of like thoughts and prayers, you know, like it's worse than thoughts and prayers. You're taking it, it's like the wolf or the fox or whatever the saying is guarding the hen house. You know, you're entrusting known predators with histories of murder and violence and oppression and exploitation and lies. You know, you name it, government has done it. And yet you have people who want to believe so badly in this illusion that's been constructed for them by literally everyone, by their parents, by their schools, by their television sets, by every aspect of the culture. In movies, it's so celebrated in movies, which is funny because people hate Hollywood. A lot of people hate Hollywood, but they perpetuate some of the most effective government propaganda, and they work in concert with these departments, with the Pentagon, with the FBI, with the CIA. And they're helping craft the stories in exchange for favors and inside information. So it's, as much as I disagree with people's dogmatic faith in government, it's easy to understand why they're so attached to it.
What would be an example of Hollywood kind of making propaganda for the government? I have an idea of what it is, but I want to know your opinion on it.
Yeah, so for example, the Department of Defense actually has an entire department they're like a liaison to Hollywood. So they check in, and it's been a very long time since I reported on this, but I want to say, so for example, the show 24, which I think was about a CIA agent. So I think they would have, that one the producers were, or no, I want to say it was the producers being wined and dined by the CIA, but it might have been the other way around. But either way, they had this very nefarious relationship. Zero Dark 30, which portrayed torture on the part of the government as working, to find bin Laden. Then there was Argo, which was about, I think it takes place in Iran during the hostage crisis. That one also had influence from the Pentagon. So it's like in exchange for softening the narratives, for molding the narratives of this entertainment around what these government agencies want them to say, they then get access to special equipment. I think it was Apocalypse Now, I want to say, in the 70s, which I think it was the one Francis Ford Coppola did. So it was that or Platoon, one of those. They wouldn't bend to what the military wanted, so they lost out on getting to use the official equipment. So it's funny because Hollywood is considered so left-wing and liberal, and it is, of course. I'm not going to argue that they're not, but it's more of a two-party ideological system when you look at like the behind-the-scenes mechanisms of how they work, and they're just as in bed with government as any other industry as well.
That's like way deeper than I thought it was. That's insane. I literally had no idea because one of my dad's favorite shows growing up, like he would always watch 24, and I would fucking watching 24 all the time.
Right.
And I never liked it. I always thought it was a stupid show. But it's just weird to think about. It's really weird to think about because like in my mind when you said like pro-government propaganda, this is my guilty pleasure. I'm like a big fan of like war movies, Americana movies, like anything that is like fuck you communists, like we're America, we're blowing shit up. Like I love that shit. I live for that shit. And so, you know, I'll watch a movie about like Vietnam or something, and like deep down I know it's wrong, but it's still entertaining. But I feel like the majority of people who, you know, don't say anything wrong with the military industrial complex because there are troops and they're fighting for our freedom and yada yada yada, I feel like that shit will work on them. So I get it.
Right. And it reinforces their beliefs that they already have, you know, like and even me, I was watching The Patriot on the 4th of July, even though I'm like,
okay, thank you. Literally my favorite movie. I fucking hate Mel Gibson. I have a hard time reconciling that, but love that movie.
But he was great in it, and I haven't seen it since I was a little kid. And I was like, you know what? I'm just going to be a nationalist. For one day of my activist career, I'm going to be a nationalist. And it's funny because as much as I'm so removed from the idea of nationalism and patriotism, I watched that movie and I'm like, yeah, America.
The propaganda works. The propaganda works.
Yeah, exactly.
Heath Ledger being in that movie does help, but
it really does.
I mean, so hot, and I miss him, R.I.P.
I know.
But that shit works. And like I remember, like I grew up watching The Patriot, like that again, one of my dad's favorite movies that I actually liked and watched. And then like I remember like years later, I like kind of read about like Mel Gibson's like racist rants and shit. And I was like, why was he being portrayed as like this awesome like patriot in this movie? And he was like super nice, like, freed the slaves and shit. And I was like, damn, like we really can't have shit. But that's how Hollywood propaganda works because it really made me believe that Mel Gibson was a good person and that the government was great and that I should be like this ardent supporter of like the military or whatever. But I do want to read some questions. We got a couple questions.
Okay.
Euphoric Gaming says, got a question. What would you do if a friend is trying to force you to get the COVID vax? They're super socialist and offer forced vaccinations for the good of the people, but she's my best friend. And you don't have to say if you're vaccinated or not. I don't really care, but just what is your opinion on that?
I'm not vaccinated. It's not a secret.
Okay.
I'm really not hoping the vaccine is dangerous. I would really love for it to be safe. I'm just not personally willing to stake my health on that. You know, I think there's two angles to that because on one hand, I think the good of the people argument is kind of, it's moot now. It doesn't count anymore because we found out that vaccinated people can also spread the virus. So as far as like challenging narratives, I don't know why they still keep saying this because it's been weeks now that everyone has been aware.
Stupid.
Yeah. And I think there's that angle, but I think in addition, and to extend that angle, you know, this counter argument or whatever to what this person is saying. I've been saying, you know, I haven't had that many people push me in my life, but it's just, I can respect your bodily autonomy. If you believe that that's the right choice for you, go for it. I might disagree, but I'm not going to tell you you can't. I'm not going to push you. You know, you're making a choice about your health. I don't know what's best for your health. Only you can decide that, maybe with a doctor who maybe isn't, you know, bought out by the big pharma industrial complex, whatever. But I think it really just comes down to respect for individual choices, which I don't know if that works for a socialist. But I would hope that a socialist would at least subscribe to the belief of like my body, my choice. And again, I know that the counter is it's not just your body, you're infecting other people. Okay, right. And so are vaccinated people. So it's just like, we just keep going in this circle of like, it's kind of difficult to talk to people who are still in that mindset. I've actually had some good conversations recently because the more information that comes out, the more people are questioning like the very rigid narratives that started this year with the vaccines, because everything's up in the air now. And something I was saying to someone that actually resonated with them was, oh my goodness, look at that. We're all human. Unvaccinated people can spread it. Vaccinated people can spread it. Look at that. Nobody's better than anybody else. We're literally all just human, which brings it back to politicians too. They can't save you either.
Exactly. And I was having a similar conversation with one of my mom's friends yesterday. We were all, you know, sitting around drinking Trulies like girls do or whatever. And she knows I'm a journalist and she had read some of my recent articles and she said, oh, what's your next article about? And I was like, well, I'm writing about people who are non-compliant with the vaccine passport mandates in New York City. And she was like, oh, we're going to have to talk about that because I think that everyone should be vaccinated, and it's all these conservatives that are saying it's my body, my choice, but they're not pro-choice. And I was like, whoa, like you're conflating like so many different arguments right now, and you're pushing on this like opinion that you think I have that I don't even necessarily have. Because I've talked about this before. I don't view abortion as a black and white issue. I think that there's a certain point where that's a separate body, that's a separate baby. Like you can't do anything if it's for the mother's life or something like that. I really have no problem with it. That's just my opinion. I don't think it's a black and white issue, but it's a whole different thing. But it's like, it was just crazy how she like put that on me. She was like, you conservatives, you want to take away my bodily autonomy. By the way, this is like a 45-year-old woman. I'm like, she's not having an abortion. And I'm just like literally, I don't understand how the conversation got this polarized. What is so controversial about not wanting to take an experimental vaccine? And I said, I'm not an anti-vaxxer. I've had vaccinations before. However, I've never gotten a flu shot because I don't get the flu and I don't get really sick. And I also had COVID. And it wasn't that fucking bad. Like, I'll just say it. It was like a cold. Like, the one thing that changed, and I don't know if you've had it or anyone in the chat has had it, it's not really a joke when people say that your taste changed, because I did notice that I can't eat mint anymore. Mint tastes fucking disgusting to me now.
Oh, interesting.
I know, it's so weird. Like, I had to get a different toothpaste that's like fucking bubblegum flavored because the mint is like horrible. But that's really the only thing I noticed. So I was like, okay, I would rather not be able to eat mint for the rest of my life than to live under this fucking tyrannical rule and like all this shit. I was like, I'll take that. That's fine. So that was my answer to her. And she like went on this whole tirade about how evil conservatives are, and they're all anti-choice and they're all faking about caring about bodily autonomy. And I'm like, the conservative argument against abortion is that it's another person. They're not saying that you don't have control over your own body. They're saying that they don't want you to kill another body. I'm not even saying I necessarily held that view. I'm just saying that you just don't even understand the argument. You can't conflate it like that. But I feel like that's the average like Democrat these days, and even some like neoconservatives who really just believe that you should just do things to yourself for the good of all people, whether or not it's actually been proven to be for the good of all people, because we know that the CDC has actually not proven the vaccine to be for the good of all people. There are still things that have not been approved. I mean, the FDA is scheduled to approve Pfizer, I think, pretty soon, but it's still like every vaccine is not fully approved yet. There's still tests going on. I had to talk my mom out of giving it to my brother, who's 14, because they've found heart issues with boys between the ages of like 15 and 20. And I was like, fuck no. Like,
exactly.
He's not in the group to be affected by COVID. Like, he's not going to die of COVID. So what's the point?
Exactly. And, it's something that's really been bugging me lately. And it's funny because I hate talking about like I hate talking about girl stuff, but a lot of women have been having irregular periods after getting the vaccine.
Another thing, like, this isn't a big deal. I'm like, how is infertility and menstrual cycles not a big deal? How is that not a big deal?
And what I find so interesting and also frustrating is I saw a Twitter thread, and it was a bunch of women talking about this and like really freaking out. Like, it hasn't gone back to normal. I don't know what to do. I was not warned that this could be a potential side effect. So it was like a Friday night. And what do I do on Friday nights? I'm just sitting, on the internet. And so I looked up, like, okay, what's the mainstream reporting on this? And I found an NPR article that's basically, to me, it reads like frickin' propaganda. Like, they're saying, they interview all these quote unquote experts. They're saying it's only temporary. Everyone we've heard from, it always goes back to normal. And I'm like, that's different from what I'm reading from actual women. They're saying the opposite. But every single expert they interview is like, we don't know. Sorry. They don't really test for that when they're doing trials for vaccines. It's not specific to the COVID thing. It's just like not something that they account for, but definitely go get it. We don't know why it's happening, but still go get it. You have to go get it. It's definitely safe. Don't worry about it. And I'm just like, wait a minute. Okay, look, aside from like the hypocrisy that I consider to be the leftist view of my body, my choice, because they're just reducing women to their body parts. That's where they get autonomy. They don't get autonomy over who they want to pay taxes to. They don't get autonomy over like any other human, like they don't acknowledge our conscious choices. It's only, you're pussy. Sorry to use that word, but like it's just the easiest.
No, go ahead. Go ahead, because that shit pisses me off too. It's like, how do feminists pretend to care about our bodily autonomy, but they want us to basically slave away for the government and send our kids to shit schools, but they can have an abortion. That's really all they give a fuck about. So yeah.
And they're happy to objectify you if it fits their narrative and their ideology, like the frickin' pussy hats and all of that entire movement was so like, it was just reducing women to their pussies. And I know that they like to believe that they believe in they have other values, they care about the environment, they care about XYZ. But ultimately, all of that comes down to a very anti-consent ideology because everything is forced upon people. So on one hand, like just in general, the my body, my choice thing has been an issue with the vaccine stuff. But now they're literally saying, no, you also can't make a choice about your pussy either. No, you have to sacrifice your bodily autonomy that I have been promoting and sounding the alarm about, saying it was going to be completely destroyed by Republicans. Now, no, you have to take the vaccine anyway. You don't get to be concerned. You don't get to make a personal decision. You're of childbearing age, but no, you have to get it anyway. And if you don't, you're selfish and you hate people. I'm sorry, I'm not the selfish one here. Leave me alone.
Nah, literally fuck that. Literally fuck that. I know. Yeah, just anecdotally, I know somebody who got the vaccine and started complaining to me about how her period was very irregular after that, and previously she had a very regular cycle.
Yeah.
And I looked it up and I found an article that was from a mainstream outlet. I'd have to find it again, but it was basically just like there have been women that have experienced an irregular cycle since getting the vaccine, but it's not important, still get the vaccine. I'm just like, I was so offended by it. I'm so offended by it because it seems like women's empowerment is all like, you have the right to not have kids. You have the right to birth control, to abortion, and all this great stuff. You have the right to not have kids, but we actually don't give a fuck about your fertility. We don't give a fuck if you do want to have kids, because if you do want to have kids, that's just you. That's just a patriarchy talking, sis. You really don't want to have kids.
Exactly.
Like, that is just
repression talking.
It's so unrelatable to the average woman, I think, because I do think the average woman does want a family, and even if they don't, it's not like they hate children. It's not like they want everyone else to not have children, but it's just like, it's so unrelatable. I don't know what these, like, where these outlets and blogs are coming from that shit. It's like they hire the most like fucking liberal elitist people to write for them. Like, oh, it's okay if your fertility is messed up. It's okay. Yeah. It's okay, because guess what? You can be the cool wine aunt with 19 pounds. It's cool.
We need more of those. And just to clarify, so the working hypothesis is just that the vaccination activates the immune system and therefore triggers an irregular menstrual cycle, which is like possible. Sure. I'm willing to believe that could be it, but I'm reading a mainstream trusted source, NPR. They don't get fact checked, you can trust them. They're the good people. They provide all of the real, true information. And they're openly saying, no, we don't really know. Probably we're not sure. It hasn't been tested, but definitely go get it. The FDA is now going to approve it, and they still don't know why. They have a guess, but I'm sorry, has it not been the rallying cry for these people that science is the only thing that matters? It is extremely anti-science to just openly be like, no, we don't know, but it's totally safe. Like, what? I'm sorry, I'm not buying it. I'm done being gaslit about it. I'm not, like, I completely respect people's rights to make decisions about their own health. Someone who's in their 50s, that's not really a concern for them. A woman in her 50s, fine. If you want to make that decision, you have an autoimmune disease, you're in treatment for cancer, sure. If you are more concerned that COVID is a bigger threat to your health than the vaccine, go for it. I respect your bodily autonomy, and I would just like the same. That's all. I'm not asking too much, but to these people, I'm like a Nazi for believing this.
You are a Nazi, but me too, because when I was talking to my mom's friend yesterday, I was like, if you were in like the 65 or 55 plus or whatever range, if you have a pre-existing condition, if you are, if you just feel exactly how you said, if you feel like the risks of getting COVID outweigh the risks of getting the vaccine, by all means, please get it. My grandparents are vaccinated. I wanted them to be vaccinated because they're in that group where I believe it would be worse for them if they got COVID. We were very careful with my grandparents. We wore masks around them all the time. So it's not me being anti-science, not me being anti-vax. It's literally just about personal choice. And then they were all like, well, what about the hot spots in Florida and Texas? And they have like very high rates of people passing away from COVID. Yeah. And I was like, first of all, Florida and Texas are 99% old people and 99% obese people. You can't sit here and fucking tell me that there is no correlation between the amount of like all these snowbirds migrating down to Florida and living in these tight-knit like senior communities and getting COVID, and they're unhealthy. That's not me hating on people from Florida or from Texas. I'm just saying there are certain states with lower standards of health, and there are certain states that have higher concentrations of older people. So you're going to see more older people and more, medically obese people pass away from COVID because it's a pre-existing condition. Nobody wants to talk about that though, because they would rather give you a free Big Mac with a vaccine than actually talk about obesity, morbid obesity being a cause of, pre-existing conditions that worsen the impact of COVID. But that's how you know it's all a fucking virtue signal. That's how you know it's not all about health, because if they really wanted to like be all authoritarian about health, they would do some like Bill de Blasio shit and like ban big gulps everywhere.
Right, exactly.
Did that, or somebody did. It was in New York, I think.
Yeah, I think it was New York.
Yeah, so it's like, why are you banning people who don't want to get the vaccine from going to the club? You could just ban the club if you really care about health.
Right, exactly.
Prohibition, everything. But that's just how you know it's not really a fucking about health, like ever.
Absolutely. And just to clarify, like, I don't think that people who got COVID and had a severe reaction because they were obese, because they made poor lifestyle decisions, that doesn't make it less tragic. It's a life loss. Like, it doesn't mean that their lives were less meaningless. However, to what extent am I obligated to compensate for other people's life choices? I don't go around coughing on people. I'm a hermit. I don't even go into large crowds. I'm such an introvert. I stay home. And I did that before stay at home, like that's just my nature. I'm not out and about spreading disease. And it's starting to get to me seeing how much people are collectivizing literally millions of people into this tiny little group of, so I was reading an article, a mainstream news article from last weekend, and there was a protest here in LA. I could not even figure out what the point of the protest was because it had been written in such a biased way. So basically it was reported as an anti-vax conspiracy theory pro-Trump rally where somebody got stabbed and a journalist got beat up. And this is now, I'm just watching these narratives creeping in of collectivizing people who aren't vaccinated as, like you said, like a conservative, as a Trump supporter, as a conspiracy theorist, as a Nazi. And it's not surprising if you know history, but it's still disturbing to see so many people just eating it up because that just confirms their beliefs. And they've been so terrified the last year and a half, which is not their fault. I view the way the media has reported this as seriously psychologically abusive, just like nonstop fight or flight triggering intentionally. Like, they're trying to terrify people because it gets them clicks and it gets them views. And of course, people are going to be terrified now. They have been living in like such a suspended state of fear and stress response for so long. Anything that challenges that and that challenges the prescribed solutions they've been given from the very same people who terrify them, they're not going to be able to hear it. It's like it doesn't compute because that would disrupt their a multi-layered reality that has been constructed for them. So like I can understand why they react this way, but again, that doesn't mean that I have to conform to their reality, and I will not do that.
Yeah, I completely understand the fear from certain people, especially people who lived in like a hot spot or super spreader type area. My friend from New York was actually in the beginning of the pandemic so scared, would get mad at me because I would ride on the metro because I live in DC. I'd ride on the metro before the mask mandates and before everything shut down. But people were at this point were still very scared, and he would be yelling at me like, "You have to wear a mask! Like, it's crazy!" Like, I get it because I was scared in the beginning too. I feel like I let my inner status creep out a little bit in the beginning because I was like, maybe we should lock down, 2 weeks to slow the spread. Little did we fucking know that I wasn't going to be 2 weeks to slow the spread. But at the time, I was very concerned because they were acting like it was the bubonic plague.
Right.
And now I'm just sitting here feeling stupid. And I can't really relate to those people who are so scared all the time anymore. Right. Unless you have a pre-existing condition, unless you are 65 plus, I just don't relate to it. I don't relate to it. People have shamed me because I've traveled a lot this whole past year, and I caught COVID once, got over it. It was fine. But people have literally shamed me, and now I'm just like, I'm kind of done being sympathetic to those people. Like, I get what you mean. Like, I feel where they're coming from, but it's like at the point, if you're like shaming me for my choices, then I just can't believe it.
Well, and I think that's such an important piece of statism in general, not just the COVID stuff. Like, it's a very well demonstrated through the COVID stuff. But you were talking about how when it started, you were concerned and you thought, okay, maybe this could be the bubonic plague. So what they do, and I'm not saying it's some like conspiracy theory plan that they sit in a dark, in a room behind a card table smoking cigars and planning how they're going to do this. But the nature of the state is to exploit people's empathy and compassion. So they took an authentic concern, a very human emotion to be like, oh, I'm concerned about other people's safety and lives. I want people to be okay. They take that and then they exploit it and mutate it through the mechanism of government, which is violence. And then they create all these unintended consequences. And that is the basis of so horribly failed policies. Like, look at the war on terror. They exploited people's fears, their anger, all these human emotions that are very authentic that people had every reason to feel. They were concerned. They didn't want their cities to be blown up. I mean, that was like a real fear after 9/11. They take all this authentic human emotion, they call it compassion to go spread democracy in another country, allegedly to keep us safe. And then you have war crimes, and you have oppression, you have exploitation, and you have all these layers of just the most vile human behavior. And they managed to do that by taking people's empathy and compassion, which I think is especially true for the left when it comes to like welfare programs and big government that's allegedly supposed to help the poor and help all of these marginalized communities. And really it just perpetuates the marginalization. But because people have associated state action with compassion, it's so sad, because compassion is a wonderful thing and their intentions are so good. And it's unfortunate that all the programming then skews it into statism.
Do you think that the right does something similar? Do you think that they exploit people's compassion for their policies as well?
Oh, of course. Yeah, absolutely. And you know, I think it's more pronounced on the left because they weave that into their marketing much more. Like they pride themselves on their tolerance and their compassion. And of course that's, you know, I see it in right-wing narratives as well. It's just, I feel like they're not striving so hard to prove it because that's not, it's not the foundation of how they seek to manipulate people. Whereas on the left, that's, you know.
I mean, yeah, all they love to say is that we're more tolerant, we're more accepting than you, we care about equality more than you. And the right, I feel like they may pull at people's heartstrings in a slightly different way.
Right.
I think it's more out of fear. I think they'll say shit like, this is a war on Christmas, or the Sharia law is coming to America.
Right.
Whatever the fuck. So that's why we have to send Israel like $14 billion because Sharia law is coming to America. That's just what I've heard. So I get, and then, you know, it gets the boomers all riled up, which is like, that's great for them.
Right.
It does piss me off though. I just wanted to ask that because I definitely see the left doing that, but and I know you're not like on the right, like I know you're not conservative, but I fail to see a lot of people who are just not on the left say shit like that about the right, because a lot of people don't want to look inward and be like, oh yeah, my own side is doing that too. So when I talk about more traditional, when I talk to more traditional like conservatives or Republicans or even like some right libertarians, and they're not quick to admit that, because I think that would be admitting to themselves that they've been played, which is always hard, because I went through that phase where I was like I was never a Republican, but I was pretty like hardcore, like Trump train, like whatever the fuck. And that was me for a while, and like it became a little bit too much of my personality, and then I had to like look inward and be like, it's still the government. I don't know why I'm acting like this is like some anarchist, like anti-establishment thing where it's still the government.
Right.
I mean, it's like, would I take Trump over Biden? Like, yes, obviously, but can I like trust? Can I trust anyone who's elected to be president? Like, probably not. And so that was the thing I had to look inward about, because then I realized that, you know, during 2016 when Trump was elected, it was like that was the whole like Sharia law thing, and now it's like the whole vaccine passport and critical race theory thing. Now that's the whole big boogeyman, and I really feel like the right actually does a great job at getting sympathy from people without appearing as like the sympathetic party, I guess.
Right. And it's, you know, I mean, I've never been on the right. It's funny because I've been labeled right wing by like academics, you know, like I'm part of the right wing echo chamber who's every day and speaks out against the police state. You know, like they're just labels. But I do think it's, did I just lose my train of thought? I think I did. Never mind. Move on.
No. I get what you're saying.
Yeah, well, and I think too, you know, I see it on the right. So, for example, they do this, especially, you know, with something like foreign policy. All of a sudden, it becomes, these poor people that are so, like, even in Afghanistan right now, all of a sudden they care about women. And I know this is also coming from.
It was literally insane. I don't know. Do you see the Marianne Williamson tweet that was agreeing with Bill Kristol and how that she should fought Afghanistan? Yeah. And then she responded to somebody today because somebody had posted a link that was like some CIA shit, and they were like, "We're going to use feminism to get Westerners to care about like not pulling out."
Yeah,
and she admitted, and Marianne was like, "I admit that I fell for the propaganda. I fell for that shit. We don't give a fuck about Afghanistan. We don't give a fuck about their women. We don't give a fuck about their children. Individually, we can, But our government has never given a single
exactly
about them. So why do we act like they do?
Exactly. Why? And then you see these politicians, these neocons, again, exploiting people's compassion and empathy. Like, yeah, people are going to suffer, and that is really awful. But the reporting on it is taken so out of context. Like, I mean, there have been memes about it this whole past week. Everybody's arguing about Trump and Biden, and it's like George Bush is over there just laughing, having a great time because
oh my God. It's like we fall for the same fucking circus tricks. Right. And like the people at the top of the fucking uniparty, they're just fucking laughing at us because there's this picture and it's like George Bush, Bill Clinton, Hillary Clinton, and like the Obamas like laughing. And I was like, yeah, they're all besties. They're all best friends. I'm sorry. I have to put this comment up because this shit is so funny. We gotta go to Afghanistan for 15 days to slow the spread of the Taliban. Thank you. I agree. I mean, what could go wrong?
I bet a lot of people would be like, yeah, that makes perfect sense. Let's go.
15 days we can stop the Taliban. 15 days we can start nation building. Women will have rights, and then we'll leave, and then everything will be fine, and we won't leave any weapons behind.
It only took 20 years and 15 days. We did it, guys. We saved Afghanistan.
Saved Afghanistan. As a service member, this shit is rough. It's almost like, what was it all for? That definitely resonates with me and a lot of people who, because I grew up after 9/11. I have no recollection of it. I'm a child, whatever. And so when I see people who are like post 9/11 veterans who went over there, you know, came back with horrible fucking PTSD, nightmares. They lost friends there. They may have lost a fucking leg there. Shit was horrible. And then I've seen this a very common theme on Twitter like the last couple weeks being like, what the fuck do we even do that shit for? Because we were all told that we were fighting for not only our freedom, but we were fighting to liberate, you know, Afghani women and children from the Taliban and to stop another 9/11. And it must be so hard. And I really feel for you guys because I feel like there's this, and you can like correct me if you feel like I'm wrong or if you have a different point of view, but I feel like there's this kind of sentiment on like the liberty anarchy side of things where people are kind of like don't have much sympathy for military veterans just because they're part of the industrial complex, but I kind of view them as victims too because nobody wants to sign up for the military to kill people. I think that's kind of like just a straw man. I don't think anyone really does that. I think people signed up because they were told they were going to fight for freedom, and it turns out that shit wasn't real, and it really sucks, and I really feel bad for them.
Yeah, and you know, I have talked to people who are like, no, I want to go kill brown people. Like that.
Oh, goddamn. Well,
they're like, I want to kill. But no, that's not the rule. I think that's more the exception. It's usually people who really want to help their country. They love their country. It's been sold to them as one thing. They go over there and they find out that it's not. I have incredible empathy for those people. And I actually find that there are a lot of anarchist veterans because what better way to see the brutality and the corruption and the inefficiency of the state than to go fight over there and to be in one of the most bloated agencies of government, the Pentagon, you know, with so much. There's just so many layers of bureaucracy and deceit. I mean, with the Afghanistan papers that the Washington Post published, we found that they had lied pretty much for the whole war to justify staying there, to justify the occupation. So, yeah, I don't take that hardline view of like, oh, if you work for the government, you're a bad person. You know, I don't even think all cops are bastards. I don't like to say that. I don't think it's good.
I don't either. And I've taken a very anti-law enforcement stance at most times. I think that the system is just fundamentally fucking horrible. Right. But I know plenty of individual police officers who are good people who think the system is bad. But we do have these statutes in place. Like people always talk about, oh, it's not. Why do you have these statutes in place like qualified immunity that protects the bad apples? So it's the whole system. I don't think it's the individuals, but it's good that you bring discussion because I think that part of why this whole movement, this whole ideology, anarchy, libertarianism, whatever you want to call it, turns off a lot of people is because people think, oh, you just hate cops, you just hate like soldiers, you hate Marines, and we love Marines and blah, 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 blah. Like you don't have to be all thin blue line and shit, but I think people do have to have a level of like decorum, just talk about
exactly. Like you have to meet these people kind of where they're at, you know, and that doesn't, I mean, if you watch my videos, I don't pussyfoot around it. You know, I say what I have to say and I say it forcefully. However, I don't think it's particularly like if you're trying to reach a conservative, you're going to automatically anger them and turn them off and then you lose them if you go about it that way. And I'm sure I've made a lot of videos that way. My last top video was not, I feel like I did a decent job of meeting people in the middle, but I mean, also sincerely, I've been doing this a long time. I came into this with a very black and white view. And the older I get, the more I realize like that's not reality. There's room for gray area. And as much as I don't have to agree with something a police officer does, I don't have to agree with even their legitimacy. I don't believe in their authority. They don't have special rights. I don't believe they have the right to tell anybody what to do in the name of the law or because they're wearing a badge. However, that doesn't mean there aren't decent human beings who swallowed the propaganda and swallowed the indoctrination and thought this is how I can help people. And that's why they went into it. And I'm not going to demonize those people. Yeah, it's probably time to get out of the force. Yeah, if you're not calling out bad police, does that make you a bad police officer? Probably. But I understand the way the system works. And I just like, I don't have room in my heart to hate every single person that works for the government anymore. Like I've tried that and it doesn't work. So I don't have to submit. I don't have to say that they can trample my rights, but I also don't have to like be toxic about my opposition, you know?
Yeah, there are definitely people who want to be public servants and that's why they work for the government. I completely get that. But once you get in there and once you see that you have to enforce unconstitutional laws or lose your job and they still do it to keep their job, and then I have a little bit less sympathy. But I do want to read this question because it's kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Is compassion the largest reason conservatism and libertarianism are less palatable to women than men?
Less palatable. Yeah, I actually have an entire speech on this on YouTube if anyone wants to watch. It's called Why Aren't There More Women in the Movement? If you type my name with that, it should come up. It was at Anarchapulco 2019, I think. I actually have spent a lot of time thinking about this. I think that is a big reason. And it's not that women are compassionate or more encouraged to cultivate compassion and to lean into it in our culture and society. I think it's the exploitation of that tendency. So basically what progressives and liberals have done have postured themselves and painted themselves as compassionate toward everybody, including women. They're the champions of women's rights. And again, to come back to what we were talking about earlier on, you can't really be compassionate when you're using the barrel of a gun to force somebody to do something. But that's the great fiction and the great mythology of the state is people can't see the violence. So they trick women who genuinely care about, well, and men do too. I don't want to say only women care about humanity, you know, but like to the nature of this question, They take that compassion and then they filter it into political objectives and aims. And they get people thinking that they're doing the right thing when in fact, to me, it's all immoral if it's done through force and violence, and then it's not even effective. So I think that is a big reason that women aren't as open to libertarianism, which is unfortunate because in my view, of course, as someone who's like a libertarian anarchist, that's the more compassionate way to not force people to use voluntary interactions to help people, you know, to increase standards of living. And of course, people can disagree with the effectiveness of that. But to me, I find it much more compassionate to honor other people's autonomy and be like, no, I'm not going to use a violent institution to get you to do what I want to do. So that's kind of, I have a whole video written on this that I really need to film. It's just long,
I definitely have to watch it, and I'm gonna find it and put it like the link in the description or the comments or something, because just your short description of that really just kind of almost made me change my mind, because I was about to answer that question. Yes, women are stupid and we care too much about shit. Like, no, I unironically tend to believe that more women are Democrats because they just care too much of faults. But I do agree with you kind of realizing that women do care. I think.
Oh, you cut out. I don't know if you can still hear me or if I'm still live. My timer is still going. If anyone can hear me, I'm still here, but I lost Olivia.
Oh, hold on. Am I back?
Okay. Are you back? Yes.
Okay.
Yes, there you are.
Okay. Everything like went black for like 5 seconds. I was like, oh shit. Okay.
No, you froze for a second, but we got you back.
Okay. So I was saying, I agree with you. I think women's general. Oh my God, why is it cutting out so much? Oh my God. Okay. I hope you can see me still.
I can see you. You're a little grainy, but so far I can still hear you. Okay,
let me take my phone off the Wi-Fi so there's just my computer on it. Hopefully that helped. Misdirects women's nurturing nature into supporting big government policy. Because like you said, if you really break it down, the most compassionate alone and let them help themselves and let them help other people without them getting in the way. I don't know why it's progressive to be a big fucking statist, because it's like the people who are so anti-cop, like the really basic like normal Biden and Kamala Harris, who were like ACAB, except for like the old white man and the fucking like California cop prosecuted nonviolent weed crimes. Like, well, they like they're so compassionate,
Right.
and I feel like they're the real fucking authoritarians, and they just don't really realize it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do want to kind of add to that question, and this is going to be less popular, but I'm going to say it anyway, because I do think there's something about, I think a lot of men in the libertarian movement tend to like heavily prioritize values like logic and reason over emotional consciousness and awareness and compassion. And I don't think nothing's inherently wrong. I'm not saying that's wrong, but I do think as a result of cultural conditioning, men tend to devalue those qualities because they're not masculine. You know, that's weak, that's for women. When in reality, I think that if you watch the speech, you can get the real nuance of what I'm trying to say here. If you want to watch 45 minutes of me talking, I don't expect you to, but if you want to. But I do think I think a lot of this aversion to emotion is because of the tantrums people on the left throw. So you look at people like that and you're like, oh my God, they're so freaking emotional. Oh my God. The issue isn't that they're emotional. It's that they have zero awareness and consciousness of their emotion. They have no container to hold the emotion. So they spew it all out into, you know, the electoral system and into the streets and into social media. And so emotions get a really bad rap against people on the right, when in fact, if you could just cultivate a little bit of a foundation so that you're not as reactive to your emotions, there's nothing wrong with emotions. And I think that there's this tendency of libertarians to be like, no, emotions inherently bad, but then you see them like really angry, like in comments, and I'm like, baby,
libertarians are fucking ruthless. Like I literally, like you said that you stopped reading your comments. I stopped reading that shit too. Like I read the live chat, but on Twitter, like if I get a tweet that gets over like 1,000 likes, I just mute that shit because I know some libertarian somewhere is gonna have a fucking problem with it. So I just
right. Exactly. And like, again, there's nothing wrong with being rational and logical, but I think it's kind of a logical thing to do, to accept that as humans, we have feelings, we have emotions. You can't deny that. Anger is an emotion. If you're on Twitter all day in angry arguments, you're not just logical. You're not just not emotional. No, you're freaking angry, and that's valid and it's allowed to be there. But if you keep denying it, you're going to keep having issues. You're probably not going to get through to the people you want. And then you see a lot of libertarian men being like, oh, women are just too emotional to be libertarians. It's like, well, yeah, if you keep saying that shit, why would I want to hang out with you? Why would I want to associate with you?
That is so true. That's so true. I will say this, though. I will say this, that the majority of like the actual like male like libertarian like activists and podcasts and like the little celebrities and stuff, they're typically very nice. They're not like, they're typically very nice. It's their weird ass little fans that are just like fucking
Exactly. And I'm not trying to generalize everybody. I'm not saying every libertarian feels this way, or if they
but it's the people that are perpetually online. It's the people that are perpetually online and perpetually like leaving their little comments talking about, oh, it's facts before feelings. But I'm like, you're commenting that shit 10 times under my post. Clearly you have your feelings. And it's fine.
Exactly. And it's okay. You're allowed to have your feelings, baby. Just try to feel them a little, you know, like stop denying they're there and we can move forward. I'm all about that. And I'm not trying to demonize libertarian men. I've been in this. If I wanted to leave this community, I would. You know, I've been around a long time. I've had wonderful experiences with most people in this community, men and women. Like I'm not trying to trash anybody. I just think
all for women. All for women.
Exactly. But it is that eternal question of like, why aren't there more women in the movement? And just to summarize, I think the biggest reason is this hold of progressivism over women, but I don't think it helps that you then have all these little naysayers in the libertarian community just like trashing women and calling, and it's a small minority. I'm not saying it's everybody, but say like a random woman like sees my video and she's like, oh, this sounds like, you know, that could be into this. And then she goes and follows somebody that I follow, and the comment section is like, fucking women, oh my God, they just shouldn't have a right.
It's like, why can I not post? Why can I not post without being called like a thought? Like, can y'all just chill the fuck out? Like, for one, it's like y'all complain about there's not enough women who are libertarians, all women are statists, all women are liberals. And then like the women that you agree with, like on like 85 to 99% of the shit, you're still calling them a thought. And then it's like, seems a little bit counterproductive, just a tad bit.
Oh, where are all the women? How come there aren't any women? I can't figure it out. It's all their fault.
Like I went to the Young Americans for Liberty conference like 2 weeks ago in Orlando. That shit was a sausage fest. Like,
oh yeah, welcome to libertarianism.
I thought I was gonna be like, I didn't think I didn't feel like unsafe or anything, but I felt like I was being constantly like ogled. Like I was just like, oh my god! Like
absolutely, yeah.
I was like, I can't wait to go there and meet some more female libertarians. It's gonna be so fun. We're gonna paint each other's nails and braid each other, bro. I was amazed at the lack of women there. I will say this though, I did not have to buy myself a single drink the whole time I was there, so I wasn't that like mad about it.
Right.
But I was still taken aback because I was like, there has to be a reason for this, and it can't, the reason can't just be women care too much about other people, and that's why they're not here.
Right.
It has to be another underlying reason.
Yeah. I think, that's my take on it. I'm sure other people have other ideas and things that I've never even thought of, but it's funny because I actually started getting into activism before I was ever a libertarian. It was the summer I found Ron Paul. I was interning in a film studio, and I'm from LA. I was very much raised in, it's weird because my parents didn't push it on me, but I was very much raised in like the superficial LA culture of like, oh, I should be pretty and skinny and hot and and so I was working at a film studio because I didn't know what to do with my life. I was interning, and it was really sad, like seeing all the girls coming in, like the executives would have actresses come in, like just to look at them because they were hot. Like I'd hear the conversations after they left, and it'd be like, oh yeah, I'm not going to hire her, but she's fucking hot. I just want to see her in person, like. So I was sort of steeped in this. Whoa, like maybe this culture has something to do with why I hate myself and I'm so miserable. And of course, I was young and I had much to learn, but I really started looking at the ways that women are disadvantaged and just sort of limited in their potential by the culture, which is really a left-wing culture. You can blame capitalism, but the way it's perpetuated this fusion of feminism with like self-objectification. And I know this is not really something libertarians care about, but as long as we're talking about it,
no, we should talk about it because that's why there's no fucking women in the movement, because we don't talk about shit like that. So
right, exactly. And it's, again, it's not women's fault. They're not inherently defective, and it's not men's fault for being less inclined toward compassion. There's so much cultural conditioning for men away from that to not have access to their feelings. And I think that's just as much a travesty and a crime, and not a physical crime, but like it's a wrong that's been done and perpetuated for so long, as much as I think that women shouldn't be shamed for having feelings, and that women shouldn't, XYZ shouldn't be forced to comply with any ideology, whatever. I feel the same about men. Men should absolutely be free to feel their feelings and to have the full spectrum of the human experience without being shamed for it. And if you look at what people want to call toxic masculinity, I would argue that is most perpetuated by statism and government, because there's this glorification of violence. And really rage and anger filtered through militarism, through the police state, which is like, I'm totally changing the subject now, but just to cap it, I love men. I love men so much. And I love
we love men on this channel.
We love men.
Don't clip this shit and be like, Carey and Olivia hate men. Like, don't do that. We love men. But no, I get what you're saying. I don't even view that as a tangent, because I was kind of thinking of where you were going to go with that. The whole toxic masculinity thing being kind of characterized through like really like macho, like violence and guys with guns and shit. And I think the more that women demonize that, though, the more guys are just gonna fucking do it, though. Yeah. Because like the more, like if you're like calling anyone that fucking man spreads like a toxic masculinity, people are just gonna do it more. So I think we should, instead of calling guys like toxic, we should just be like, hey, you can show your feelings. You don't have to, be all closed up like that. It's all right.
Absolutely. And I love masculinity. I love men who can protect themselves and other, like I am not down on
no, like open the car door for me. Oh, like I'm not a fucking feminist. Like do shit with me. I'm not, like, don't get the wrong idea, people, but there is a line to be drawn.
We love men, we love masculinity. All masculinity is not inherently toxic, and if it is toxic, my opinion is that it comes from the statist paradigm, which I can elaborate on more. I think I intend to do that at some point, but I gotta get the toxic.
That would be a good video topic. I feel like that would get kind of popular and maybe get some negative comments because people don't like nuance, but
right, of course. Well, and the same thing applies to like, I don't like this masculinization of femininity. So you look at people like Kamala Harris and Jen Psaki, however you say her name, and Hillary Clinton, and they're viewed as these icons of femininity. Like, no, thank you. I don't want killing people and ruling over people to be viewed as femininity, to be celebrated. That is not feminism to me, and it's not.
It's like, as long as you do something in a pantsuit, it's like feminine.
Right.
Like,
right, exactly.
Like, stop. Like, stop. Like, literally stop. Like, it's like that whole like girl boss thing where you can just like do whatever the fuck you want, but it's like, girl boss, like you can Benghazi, but girl boss, like what the fuck? How is that feminism? Like,
right, exactly. And it's one thing to be empowered and connected to yourself and confident in your abilities. It's very different to claim that you have violent authority over other people and that makes you empowered and a feminist. Like, I'm sorry, I draw the frickin' line. That's not for me. And I will have a video on this. It has been written for so long, and it kind of mirrors the speech that I told you guys about, but it'll definitely, it's about toxic femininity. So I've been meaning to do it.
Love it. I love it. You should definitely put that out. Some more comments. Chad said, shout out to Carey. She's a great guest. We had her on Wednesday. Aww. See you next weekend, Liv. Yeah, I'll see y'all in Vegas. I last minute decided to go to Vegas like next week.
Nice. So. Is there an event there?
Yeah, it's for Hotep Nation. Hotep, nice. Jesus, Uncle Hotep putting on their little thing. So all the white Hoteps like Chad and whatever, whoever are going. So that'll be a good time. Got another good comment. Should Black and gay Americans lean more into libertarianism / anarcho-capitalism, especially since lately the right / conservative movements say that Black American outreach is fruitless and the gay agenda isn't Christian? I have strong opinions on this. I do think that they should, because I have kind of I want to have abandoned the Republicans. I think there are good people that are Republicans in the past, and and the reason for that is basically the reason that this comment says. I don't think that rejecting identity is how you fight back against quote unquote identity politics, because whether the Republicans realize it or like it or not, Black people want a Black agenda. That's something that's not going to change for a long time, just because we historically have needed to have a Black agenda to get anything done for ourselves. So it's not going to go away. You can't just be colorblind and say, well, we don't need to address these issues because Black America, so we don't have to provide an alternative. If you really care about people, you will provide an alternative. You can't just say, pull yourself up by your bootstraps and get off the Democratic plantation and stop voting for Democrats. It's like, who else are they going to vote for? Who else? Because does the Republican Party have a major presence in Chicago? Do they have a major presence in Baltimore? Do they have a major presence in Detroit? Who else are they going to vote for? So I completely understand that. And as for the gay or LGBT agenda, I think that there's probably a little bit of certain people in Hollywood that want to push just sexuality on kids in general, whether it's heterosexuality or homosexuality. It makes me icky, and none of that shit is Christian or conservative, but people really only point it out when it's gay. So that's why I'm like, I really don't think that y'all really care about that, because if you really cared about people pushing shit on kids, then you would care about like the majority of content, not just the gay content from Hollywood and the music industry and whatever. So people and Black people and whatever minority group you fit into, if you feel conservative, you feel right-leaning like myself, that's great. Don't align yourself to a party that really doesn't give a fuck about you. And I would say that to white people too, because the Republicans have neglected the white working class just as they have neglected the Black working class. So this isn't really about race. It's just kind of like, I don't see the reason to align yourself with a major party at all, no matter what demographic you fit into. But I will let you answer that question as well.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with everything you said. And I think it kind of boggles. I think there's been such a pushback against identity politics, which is fair and legitimate. I don't think identity politics is going to lead to anything actually progressive or forward thinking or more freedom or any of that. However, I am kind of perplexed, and this is going to be an unpopular thing to say, but I'm kind of perplexed by the reaction of libertarians and anarchists to the identity politics. Like, it's one thing to reject the identity politics, but I find that instead of seeing an incredible opportunity to appeal to these demographics, because all of history, it's all there. It's not hard to make the case that the state has been the biggest oppressor and perpetuator of racism and bigotry. That's a very simple and a factually based argument to make. So I'm kind of left wondering why there aren't more libertarians who take that angle. You know, you can reject identity politics while still acknowledging reality. And I think denying that reality drives a lot of people away when we could be bringing more people to the table in a way that would better serve them, at least politically. You know, like you said, like why would the Democrats and the Republicans aren't going to help anybody, let alone the groups that they've been oppressing more severely. I'm not going to say only, because everybody gets freaking oppressed by the state, but the people who have had the most glaring hardships, like, they're still not going to get retribution or anything resembling representation from the government, from the two-party system. So I feel like there's so much opportunity there that we could be seizing. I shouldn't say we, but individuals who share the ideology. I don't want to speak for everybody.
No, you're right, and it's good that you bring it up, because I feel like so many libertarians are so worried about being like anti-woke that they think that talking about race or identity in general to appeal to a certain demographic, you're just a social justice warrior. And I've seen people criticize, like, pretty prominent libertarians like Spike Cohen will talk about systemic racism and how the government has been the biggest perpetrator of racism in America, and how it still affects people, sentencing disparities, the war on drugs, shit like that. And people be in the comments like, oh, this is woke. I expected more from a libertarian. Like, it's the truth. It's the truth. The government is racist. I don't know what is so hard to believe. If you hate the government and you think the government is evil, and if you're already a libertarian or anarchist and you already think these negative things about the government, why is adding racist to that like the thing that makes you like,
exactly.
Like, that's so dumb.
Right. And on the flip side, to be fair, also, I mean, I felt very disconnected from the left-wing anti-police movement last year, because nobody would talk. Well, I'm not saying they were conscious of it and chose not to talk about it, but if you're not talking about the violence of the state, if you're not talking about, again, this religion where millions of people believe that because you're wearing a badge and because you work for the government, you have a right to dictate what people have to do. You can pull people over for victimless crimes. You can shoot them for victimless crimes, and it'll be justified because, well, he resisted authority. It's this belief in authority. That's the religion. Like, statism, yes, is a religion, but what really drives it is this belief in the goodness and the virtue of violent authority. And that, of course, was not going to be part of the mainstream conversation about police brutality last year. So as much as I feel disconnected from the libertarians who deny racism, I also felt disconnected from the police accountability movement that denies statism, because their solution is statism, So I think we're politically hopeless, but what was that?
Sorry, I cut out a little bit. But I want to say I did feel very disenchanted with a lot of the conservative movement this whole past year, because there was the Black Lives Matter protest last year and COVID last year, and a lot of people are still very, very infatuated with the police. And the main thing that happened was the almost a tipping point for me was the Ahmaud Arbery case, where he was murdered, and he wasn't even murdered by like on-duty police officers. It was just these fucking guys. But I saw conservatives defending that shit like he wasn't supposed to be there, and I'm like, I thought that y'all believed in private property. I thought y'all believed in sovereignty. I thought y'all believed in due process. Apparently not. Literally, apparently not. And so all last year, seeing people defend people being killed over a victimless crime, like people were talking about, oh, Eric Garner resisted arrest. He resisted arrest, or whoever the fuck resisted arrest. I'm like, what victim did Eric Garner
exactly
have for selling a sin? And even like drugs, like I don't get, oh, Breonna Taylor's boyfriend was a drug dealer. Okay,
right?
Like,
exactly.
What? Yeah, could not give less of a fuck. Like that, I really just, after last year, I really kind of like stopped. I mean, I still like a lot of like some certain Republicans, but I really just stopped fucking with a lot of them, just because I would see how much of a bootlicker they are when it comes to something that they agree with, because a lot of them are like, oh my god, vaccine passport is tyranny, but nothing else is tyranny. When a black person does it, it's not tyranny. So then I was just like, yeah, fuck y'all, I'm out of here.
and I think that comes back, just because the theme of our interview is statism, and statism is a religion. And I was talking about how, and I think this is more true for conservatives than liberals, at least in this aspect. I think whenever you hear them defending cops, it's like, well, he should have done what the officer said. What he did was against the law. That they had a warrant from the court. The drug, he was breaking drug laws. And it's like, okay, well, here you're missing the entire piece of legality does not equal morality. They're not the same frickin' thing. And I think that's very much the belief system of conservatives, because they view the constitutional government as moral. They view it as like this wonderful counter to the monarchy, to the British government. So to them, freedom is symbolized by the Constitution. And officers, work for the government, which is all authorized by the Constitution, and it must be legitimate, because often something you see, because I siphon through a lot of bootlicker comments because I use them for my videos, and like a common theme I see is, well, if you don't like it, change the law, vote for somebody to change the law. So there's still this blind faith that the system can fix the issue, that it's not the violence of the system that's the problem. It's, well, you didn't vote correctly, and here you have this wonderful system, even though I don't think it's legitimate at all. Read Lysander Spooner, everybody, if you haven't. It has no authority. But in these people's minds, it absolutely does. So they can justify any act of violence the state commits because they believe in the legitimacy of the government they're working for.
Yeah, I honestly should start reading comments again so I can see the bootlicker comments, because they really just annoy me to no end. But maybe I should make a little video compilation too or something.
They're wild, honestly.
But
some of those things I read, I'm like.
Yeah, it just confuses me. Like, it's just like stupidity. I don't have time to like respond to it all. But right. I will say this, as somebody who's not an anarchist, as somebody who likes the Constitution, I will say that the Constitution has failed because it's not binding. Because in my ideal situation would be that we do live in a constitutional republic, and that we have this kind of like minarchist form of government, and everyone's cool, everyone's chilling. But it's like that the Constitution has any bearing over the laws that we have today, has any bearing over how politicians act, over how law enforcement acts, over how the military acts, is just fucking wrong. You can deploy military troops without any congressional approval. The Constitution doesn't fucking matter. None of it fucking matters. They ripped it to shreds a long time ago. That's it. So do I like the Constitution? Yes. But does it really do shit is the question. And a lot of people are like, that's unconstitutional. That never really stopped anything. Oh yeah.
Yeah, and I actually wanted to be a constitutional lawyer when I was still a statist. I never thought I was going to become an anarchist, and it was revolutionary for its time. Like the values and the principles that it tried or attempted to enshrine, those are good things. The question, like you said, is it effective? And I have to quote Lysander Spooner. I hope I don't butcher it, but he said, whether the government really be one thing or another, this much is certain. It has either authorized the government, as we have had, or has been powerless to prevent it. In either case, it is unfit to exist. And this was in the 1860s. And he was a very passionate and ardent abolitionist, like slavery abolition. And he took that logic to its end conclusion, which is the Constitution itself is not voluntary. It's inherently coercive, because what he saw, and I think correctly named, was that even at the time it was written by such a tiny group of people. And like, sure, they were revolutionaries and they were heroes. You don't have to deny that they fought bravely and they were bold and truly revolutionary to deny the British government's authority. But they didn't go around asking everybody who lived in the colonies at the time. They were like, do you consent to these rules? No, they didn't do that. They had this tiny little faction of people. They didn't ask the farmers. They didn't ask the slaves. They didn't ask any of the poor people. I don't even know if they asked the landowners. Probably they had more to say. But
oh, hold on. I can't hear you again. Can't hear you. Did you unplug the mic or anything? I did see that you muted and unmuted yourself, but I still can't hear you. What the Can you guys hear her in the chat? Drop something in the chat if y'all can hear her. Wait, I heard something for a second. No, it was like literally for a second. Frick.
How about now? Can you hear me?
Wait, yes.
Okay, I'm back.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, that's weird because I didn't change any settings, but I don't know why I was muted. But now I'm back. You can hear me now, right? Am I still there?
Yes. Okay, it's just a little. Yeah. I don't know. It might be my internet fucking up. I'm sorry. Everyone in the chat says that the state muted us. I think the FBI is low-key like listening to this call because like literally what the fuck.
I hope so. I would love for that.
I almost never have technical difficulties. This shit never happens. So
weird.
I'm guessing that we're just two-based. Just two-based.
Hello, FBI agents. We love you and we want you to be free. That's what I tell them. When I'm like, I wonder if they're ever listening to me. I'm just like, I love you. I hope you don't hate me, sir.
I'm just, doing what I think is right.
No, they hate us. They were like, there's a too high concentration of libertarian females. They're not supposed to be like together. They have to be like separate. So they like bomb this fucking side. They're like, fuck no. But that's a good point. I haven't read as much Spooner as I should have, and so you bringing up that was actually something I hadn't really considered, how the founding fathers wanted freedom and all that, but it's not like they fucking asked everybody about it. They didn't ride around the countryside on a horse asking, hey, do you guys want to sign this document? Like, no. So that's actually very interesting. So I'm gonna have to re-examine my thoughts on that. So yeah, that's food for thought. I appreciate you bringing that up, because now I have to think about it. I'm like, damn, am I a status now? Like, damn.
You'll love his book. I mean, if you like that idea, that's just ripped directly from Spooner. Like, all of my thinking on the Constitution has been influenced by Spooner, and he's funny too. For somebody in like the 1870s, he's really sarcastic in his call out. So it's really fun to read, even though it's like older language, and it's a quick read too. It's, I think, 100 pages max of like pretty decent sized print. Yeah. It's not like a heavy deep dive. It's fantastic. Anybody should read that. Cause again, it's not that like, cause I understand why people value the Constitution. It's just, the question is it effective, and was it ever legitimate? And my answer now is no. As much as I used to love the Constitution, having studied history, it's no. And I don't consent. But I think it actually is a good pivot point. Like, for people who value the Constitution, I think it is a good point to reach out to them and talk about the importance of the values, but also the effectiveness of it. Because if people value the intended goals, but can acknowledge that maybe those weren't achieved, then I think there's room to take a leap toward more freedom and a different sense of awareness of the nature of government.
That is, again, that's just making me rethink my whole life a little bit, because... No, stop. Because I don't think Reed's in the chat, but I think Reed's gonna see this later and be like, yes. But
I did my job.
I trust you more than I trust him. No, you are, but I think I trust him more than I trust him, because he's kind of a shitlord. Like, he doesn't really say anything like serious, so like he'll just be like, yeah, Olivia, you have to like come do a terrorist attack with me. I'm like, stop.
Oh my god.
So that's been like my introduction to anarchism, but you're actually making like sense. So
well, you're making it easy, because you're already so far down the road. Let me trigger people with roads. But you're already, you're not like
I know, right?
You're already very free thinking. So my hope is that this is the next step for you. But if not, we'll just keep trying.
Oh, Lord. Oh man, you seriously got me stressed the fuck out, because I'm going I have like speaking events coming up where I have to talk about like being a fucking conservative and shit, and now I'm just like, whoa. I don't know if I can do this anymore.
Well, something, I heard it described this way. I can't take credit for it. This was actually Jeff Berwick, if anybody knows who that is, but I heard him explaining it to a conservative in this way. He was like, look, you already understand that government can't be trusted, that it's going to seize whatever power it can take. You already understand that free markets and voluntary cooperation and trade are superior to centralized control. So what would be the problem with taking it to its logical end conclusion? We're not trying to make like an anarcho-communist society. And sure, people should be free to have that if that's what they want, and it's free of force and coercion. But when the way he articulated that really made sense to me, especially as far as relating to conservatives and people who are already skeptical of government. There might be some glitches in the programming there, not that I've heard you say or anything, but we're talking about like more mainstream conservatives. Obviously there's some hypocrisy, but there's always hypocrisy when it comes to statism. And I think that's something I should really share too, that came from Larkin Rose as well. I like to credit the people who opened my mind. What he said was like, the goal is not to change people's, like, we're not arguing with them about their beliefs. We're not trying to convince them of anything. All we're trying to do is show them that their inherent morals that they already possess are incompatible with the state. It's not that we have to change their mind. We just have to show them that they already disagree with the state's existence. And it seems like a big leap, but when you can guide people to that themselves, most people don't believe violence is okay. They don't believe theft is okay on an individual level. And then it becomes a lot easier to help them recognize that it's their own morals and their own sense of right and wrong are incompatible with the state.
Yeah, I definitely feel that. I don't know if you've been on Twitter a lot today, but there was this whole debate because one of my friends actually who works for Young Americans for Liberty, who is a conservative / libertarian. Like we have but she tweeted out the phrase ban pornography. And a lot of people were mad saying, oh, how are you even considering yourself a libertarian or whatever the fuck if you want to ban pornography? And I really like her. I respect her. And morally, I'm pretty against porn as well. But then when I really think about it, do I want the state to enforce violence on people that do participate in pornography? And that's like the last thing I want. That's the last thing I want, because people talk about, okay, so a crime or a vice isn't a crime, an addiction isn't a crime, and I agree with all that. I think it's debatable on whether or not that porn has victims per se, but I will say that no matter what my moral beliefs are on the subject, even if I'm super like Christian traditionalist, which I'm not, but even for those people who are like super Catholic or whatever, super against porn, I don't want to change their minds on it, because I probably feel very similarly that they do about it. But I just want them. It's a little hypocritical to want people to suffer and be potentially killed if they resisted arrest over something that you just don't like. So that's what I tell a lot of conservatives. And then, some people, they understand the hypocrisy and they're okay with it. They recognize that they're being hypocritical and they're like, yeah, I don't care, ban porn. Which is like, honestly, at that point, if you can acknowledge it, then I kind of respect it a little bit more than if you're acting like you're a libertarian.
Right.
There's no hypocrisy there, but still.
Yeah. And, I think there's something to be said from that too. It's like, yeah, you can pass legislation to ban porn and you can send men with guns. You're never going to eliminate the market for porn, just like the war on drugs, just like guns, just like what liberals have to say about abortion. And it's like the state's only tool is a hammer. So everything's going to look like a nail. That's their only real mode of getting anything done, is force. And it's not even effective. So like, yeah, you can have moral opposition to pornography. I think it's probably not, I don't think it's the driving force of a lot of the mental health issues in this country, but I don't think it necessarily facilitates healing. And, it's not, I don't personally think that everybody should be watching porn, do what you want. It's not my place to say. But of course, from a moral standpoint and a strategy standpoint, banning it it's not going to work.
Yeah, I have the same view.
I agree with you.
Yeah, no, I have the same view on like every type of like sex work in general. Like a lot of conservatives, they think that, prostitution is evil. And I'll say this. I mean, I do think that prostitution in general exploits women, fosters this kind of market where people is negative and negatively impacts them. But then I'll say this, the black market for prostitution has created like powerful child trafficking rings. Exactly. And women are being enslaved because they can't get help because they're committing a crime by even being there in the first place.
Yep.
So just the prohibition of anything just creates this very dangerous black market where people can't even get out. It's like, it's insane because, so technically I live in Maryland, but if I like go 30 minutes, I'm in DC where weed is completely legal. You can go to a corner store. In Maryland, it's decriminalized, but not really. Like I still usually at all times have an illegal amount that I would get a misdemeanor for.
Right.
And it's like insane for me because it's so unsafe to buy it here, especially as a woman, because you have to get off the street. And it's like crazy to me to think that my friends who live in DC, they get that they can walk in the store and get it. And it's not dangerous for a woman to buy weed in DC because you can just go to a trusted store and pay for it with your hard-earned money. But I have to get in a fucking random guy's car and get like second weed. Like what the fuck? So then I apply that same logic to like literally anything. So to the porn industry, to the sex work industry, shit is just safer when it's legal. You're not going to have a scary guy with a gun trying to extort you for money if that shit's legal. It's just like, it's insane how people don't see that. It's insane.
Yeah, and I think, it's such a reflection of the state's addiction to authority. Because if you look at someone like Ross Ulbricht, who built the Silk Road, and he was never even charged with a violent crime. He was smeared with the murder for hire thing that they never prosecuted because they couldn't prove it. He's now imprisoned a double life sentence. And why? I can't say this for a fact, but he subverted the war on drugs. He gave people an underground place to break the law to buy drugs, but was actually more accountable because you could leave reviews of the products. You don't get reviews of products out on the street where the markets have thrived due to government. And then he also was willing to challenge the US dollar's hegemony. He said he used it, or he built it so you could use cryptocurrency. And between violating the war on drugs and violating the central banking cartel, well, he's double prison sentence plus more, I think. And they made an example of him because he dared to violate that authority, which is so arbitrary. Like you're saying, like you cross an imaginary line, and in one place you can buy a plant, and in another you could be literally killed. If a cop caught you with it and you resisted and you said, no, I think I'm okay, I own my body, I think I'm going to be good if I smoke a plant, and you didn't do what the officer said, they would be justified, according to the government, according to statism, in harming you and using physical force against you. Just because this little area that claims to have authority says you can't have it, but this other little section says that you can. There's no morality or even rhyme or reason to it.
No, and it's insane because I'm using DC as like this libertarian example, but DC literally just banned flavored tobacco products. So I can smoke weed in DC, but I can't smoke out of a blunt wrap. So what even is the fucking logic in that? So I'm not trying to like excuse DC, but just to put in people's heads that I can literally get on the metro, go like 3 stops, and be in a place where I could be killed for it. That just fucking blows my mind. So yeah. But if anyone else has any other questions in the chat, drop them. Carey, tell people where they can find your stuff, what else you have coming out, whatever else you're working on, all that.
Cool. Yeah, you can find me on, let's see, I'm still on Facebook, but I really only post my videos there because I hate Facebook, but I am on there. I'm back on Twitter. I was banned in 2018 and I just came back this year. So it's been a fun experience to rejoin the community. And I was never even active before. So it's funny they banned me. Like they had no legitimate standing to ban me, except that I ran a news organization they banned. But
it was the feds. It was the feds for sure.
I kind of hope so. Like at this point, if it wasn't the feds, like what am I doing wrong? Why aren't you guys paying attention to me? I got to get more radical. No, I'm on Twitter though. I'm on Instagram. I just started a Telegram channel, and I think I'm going to be reposting the link on my Instagram stories so people can join there. Cause I am kind of thinking at some point they are going to ban me because I don't see it getting more freedom of speech on social media. So I'm on YouTube. That's in my Twitter bio. I'm on a bunch of decentralized apps. There's MeWe. There's Float, which is made by some wonderful anarchists, libertarian anarchists. It's flote.app. They're awesome. Blockchain based. There's Minds. There's Odyssey. That's ODYSEE. They're another blockchain based organization. So you can find me anywhere. You can also Google me. But I think that's it. And I do have a new video coming out. I was going to try to post it today, but recently I prioritized my own mental health over like rushing to get a video out. So it'll be out this week. It's on Afghanistan. So
I feel that so much because I used to like hold myself to like a strict like video schedule. I was like, fuck that. Like you're gonna get these videos when I fucking put them out, and you're gonna fucking that's it.
That's the way to go.
I'll bow to you because you're like an elder YouTuber. You actually have like a good, like large sized channel, and you actually have like subscribers and shit. And I have this like small group of like 20 people that join me like every week, and that's basically it. And I'm chilling, having a good time. I'm really mad that Reed's has not joined. I'm kind of mad.
I know, rude, Reed. If you're watching this later, I'm disappointed.
We hate Reed on this channel. We actually don't like all men. We hate Reed. We like every other man. But
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
We're anti that's it, not anti-man.
Yeah, we're anti-Reed covered on this channel. Thank you so much, Carey. Thank you so much in the chat for questions. It was a good time. And make sure to follow her on Twitter, Instagram, Telegram, all the social medias. I think I linked your Twitter and YouTube in the description, but I can link whatever else you want as well. After.
Sounds good. Thanks so much for having me. It was great chatting with you.
No problem. Good night, guys.
Bye.